From Commissary Cuts to No Foods, How Jails Weaponize Hunger. Subscribe now for more authentic crime tales. Remember to like, share, and engage with us in the comments below. The sound of a prison gate slamming echoed ominously within the walls of the Cook County Jail in Chicago. It was the beginning of a brutal confrontation between desperate inmates and a broken system. On that fateful day in April 2018, what started as a hunger strike escalated into a dire crisis when inmates discovered a chilling revelation. A policy change had stripped them of their access to crucial food supplies, leaving them vulnerable and desperate. As guards reported to the scene, the chaos erupted. Inmates, already struggling with inadequate nutrition, now faced starvation. Tensions soared as a group of inmates in CCD's Division 9 barricaded themselves inside a common area, demanding immediate access to their commissary rights. "The Hunger Games have begun," one inmate shouted, a grim mix of defiance and despair in her voice. The administration's response was heavy-handed. Officers stormed the area, attempting to quell the uprising, but the desperation of the inmates had reached its breaking point. Barriers were set aflame, and the air filled with smoke and cries for justice. But what drove these individuals to this extreme act of desperation? What had preceded this chaotic moment? As law enforcement began to restore order, the seeds of this rebellion unraveled to reveal a harrowing backdrop of neglect, hunger, and the will to survive. With tensions high and emotions raw, one question echoed in the chaos. How far would they go to reclaim their basic needs? And what would this rebellion reveal about the hidden horrors of life behind bars? The answers lay buried within the stories of those who fought not just for food but for their dignity within a system designed to break them. To fully understand the explosive events at Cook County Jail, we must go back to the beginning, the lives of the inmates who found themselves trapped in a system that often disregards their basic humanity. Among them was Michelle Rodriguez, a mother of two, who had been sentenced to 6 months for a minor drug offense. Michelle grew up in a neighborhood plagued by violence and drugs. Despite her challenging upbringing, she did her best to be a role model for her children. However, tempted by the fleeting allure of quick cash, she fell into a pattern of poor choices, ultimately leading her to prison. As her time behind bars wore on, Michelle's hopes of reuniting with her children became overshadowed by the harsh reality of jail life. Commissary was a lifeline for Michelle and countless other inmates. For them, these purchases were not just about luxury items or snacks. They represented survival and a semblance of normalcy in a dehumanizing environment. Access to commissary allowed inmates to buy food, hygiene products, and other essentials. When the announcement came within the prison that their access would be severely restricted, the impact was immediate and devastating. Other inmates, like James "Jimmy" Thompson, shared a similar story. Jimmy was serving time for a property crime, yet he aspired to turn his life around. He enrolled in educational programs, hoping to regain a sense of purpose. The cuts to commissary access threatened not only his physical well-being, but also his hopes for redemption. In the days leading up to the uprising, whispers filled the common areas about the administration's new policy. "They're playing games with our lives," Michelle would often say, frustration lining her voice. Rumors of hunger strikes began circulating, and inmates began to band together, realizing that they needed to confront their situation or face the consequences of inaction. But the call for rebellion did not come without a price. As the inmates strategized their next moves, the looming question remained: would their cries for help be heard, or would they be met with further punishment? As the uprising at Cook County Jail surged, the stakes became dizzyingly high. The atmosphere simmered with tension. Barricades filled the common area, and the smell of smoke lingered in the air. The inmates fought not just for access to food, but for their dignity and humanity. As officers swarmed to restore order, a planned hunger strike turned into a furious confrontation. Michelle Rodriguez and her fellow inmates were now faced with an unthinkable predicament. They had elevated their grievances to a point of no return. The administration quickly sent in a tactical response unit, and chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as the guards attempted to regain control. As Michelle and her friends stood their ground, they realized that their desperation was resonating beyond the walls of the facility. They were quickly drawing the attention of outside advocacy groups and media outlets eager to report on the situation. Meanwhile, back within the jail's administrative office, wardens scrambled to suppress the uprising. Their focus was clear: maintain control at all costs. Officers issued threats, warning of further disciplinary action if the inmates did not cooperate. But the more they pushed, the more defiant the inmates became. In this environment, fear was morphing into resistance, a powerful commentary on the disparities within the justice system. However, as tensions escalated, the inmates faced physical repercussions. Several women were restrained and forcefully removed from the area, adding fuel to the flames of rebellion. As the dust settled, Michelle's resolve hardened. She knew they had to take their message outside the prison walls, beyond their immediate struggles, to show the world the truth of their plight. In that moment of chaos, a chilling question lingered. How far would the authorities go to maintain control, and what would happen to those who dared to defy them? In the aftermath of the uprising, Cook County Jail became a focal point for public outrage and deep concern about the treatment of inmates. Outside, activists and family members gathered, demanding answers and raising awareness about the hunger crisis inside the facility. The prison's approach to handling hunger as a weapon was laid bare for all to see, and those inside were desperate for change. Back in the jail, Michelle Rodriguez and her fellow inmates faced severe consequences for their rebellion. Stripped of minimal privileges, their lives became even more desolate. Food rations were reduced further, and access to the little comfort the commissary provided dwindled. Tensions among inmates escalated as desperation took hold. Some withdrew into silence, while others rallied behind their leaders, creating a stronger voice for their cause. As media attention grew, local news stations began broadcasting the inmates' plight. Images of protesters outside Cook County Jail waving signs and chanting for justice captured public interest. Advocacy groups mobilized, determined to shine a light on the issues surrounding prison conditions. This isn't just prison, it's a humanitarian crisis, one activist proclaimed during an interview. The energy outside contrasted sharply with the grim reality inside. Michelle, now a reluctant leader among the inmates, spoke to her fellow prisoners about the need to continue their fight. "They're trying to break us, but we are not just numbers. We are people," she urged the group. But as their voices grew stronger, so did the administration's retaliation. Reports surfaced of increasing staff discipline measures and harsh treatment for those considered agitators. Faced with the harsh reality of retaliation, the inmates began to organize more structured protests, planning to take their grievances to the courts. Yet they were aware that the judicial climate often favored the establishment. With each passing day, they considered whether they would lose the battle for basic dignity, facing yet another hunger crisis with no end in sight. What lay ahead would test their resilience in brutal ways, raising the question: how far were they willing to go to fight against a system designed to suppress them? As the situation inside Cook County Jail reached a boiling point, the tension was palpable both within the prison and in the community outside. Advocates were rallying support for the inmates, and courts began to take notice of the pressing issues raised by their plight. In the following weeks, a federal judge ordered a hearing to assess the prison's conditions and policies. The news sent shockwaves through Cook County Jail, breathing life into the inmates' hopes. Michelle Rodriguez, who had quickly emerged as a leading voice for her peers, prepared to testify about the horrors they faced daily. During her testimony, Michelle spoke passionately about the psychological toll of hunger, the lack of medical attention, and the threats of punishment that loomed over their heads. "We are not animals. We deserve to eat and live with dignity," she declared, her voice shaking but resolute. The courtroom listened, grappling with the emotional weight of a story that had unfolded far from their eyes. Meanwhile, the administration fought back, attempting to discredit the inmates' claims through carefully orchestrated narratives. Their defense rested on the idea that the inmates were ungrateful and that their actions were driven by gang affiliations rather than genuine concerns about hunger. Yet, Michelle's story resonated strongly, giving voice to countless others who had suffered in silence for too long. As the hearing progressed, It became clear that the tide was turning. Just as hope began to surface, a bombshell revelation emerged. The prison's own records indicated a significant increase in food waste and mismanagement of food supplies over the past year. The implications sent shockwaves through both the courtroom and the jail. With the evidence mounting against them, the question lingered in the air. Would the justice system finally hold the authorities accountable for their negligence, or would Michelle and her fellow inmates be left to face the consequences of their desperate attempts for survival? In a situation where hunger became a weapon, a reckoning was fast approaching, and a crucial decision lay just ahead. The battle for justice was far from over. Would the voices of the forgotten finally be heard, or would the prevailing system prevail once more?